Today, it was announced that Goldman posted higher than expected quarterly earnings of $3.44 billion, up 65%. And even though they took over $10 billion in government aid, which they were finally allowed to pay back just last month, no one is protesting their giant compensation packages that could reach, according to some estimates, as high as $700,000 for its employees. Okay, we're going to get on this one. It really doesn't matter to me how much you, as a company, want to pay your employees. I mean, as long as it's not on the taxpayer dime, brother, God bless capitalism. I'm fine with it. Whatever. Whatever you want to pay your people, fine. But does anybody else remember AIG? I mean, the protesters, they wouldn't shut up about it. It was Bonus Gate, Bonus Palooza. So why the silence now on Goldman Sachs? Why don't the same people care that, Washington was bailing them out and the Goldman executives are dumping $700 million in stock? While we're bailing them out, they're dumping their stock. Where's Acorn? I mean, are they out there protesting? Why aren't they on the front lawns of Goldman executives right now with their stupid signs yelling, corporatism, the rich are getting richer? Here's the difference. When the AIG bonus scandal was happening, the government was right there with the average American, feeling their pain, feeling the outrage. They vowed to stop or even take the bonuses. They said, we are going to stop it. They needed to be vocal against AIG. Why? Because watch this hand and don't watch what the other hand is doing. Cause a diversion. No one would notice the bonuses that they were dishing out that same week to Fannie and Freddie. When the Acorns of the world heard the rallying cry from the White House, they jumped into action. And when the media covered it, voila, the nation was in an uproar. So far, the administration has remained silent on Goldman. So has the media. So has Acorn. Is it because of the Goldman alumni in government? Maybe I'm wrong, and I hope that I am. But every day, it is getting more and more difficult to tell the difference between government and business. And this thing really smells bad. Let me show you what I mean. The Treasury Secretary at the time, this is under Bush, the Treasury Secretary was Hank Paulson. He was a former Goldman CEO. He bails out Bear Stearns and Fannie and Freddie, a government institution, but Bear Stearns was one of the real competitors of Goldman Sachs. Then, remember at the time, Lehman Brothers were starting to go down. You're like, I don't know. We should stop with this whole bailing out thing. And so they said, absolutely. We're going to let Lehman Brothers fail. So what did Hank Paulson do? The former Goldman Sachs CEO let Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers fail, the two competitors of Goldman Sachs. That's strange, especially because the very next day, the day after Lehman Brothers goes down, Paulson decides, you know what, we can't let everything fail like this, and he bails out AIG for $85 billion. It's crazy. Really a crazy coincidence, because at the Treasury meeting, in the room, the only banker in the room with the former Goldman CEO, Hank Paulson, is Lloyd Blankfein. He is the current Goldman CEO. That's so weird. And so those two are in the room, and they decided they're going to bail out AIG. That's fantastic. The very next day, after they get your $85 billion, what happens? AIG decides they're going to make Goldman Sachs the biggest single payment. $12.9 billion. Oh, the name on the check? Goldman Sachs. Isn't that weird? Oh, by the way, this is the same time when they were doing TARP. And so the Treasury Secretary, former Goldman Sachs CEO Hank Paulson, decides he's going to appoint somebody. Who could he find? He's got to get somebody to watch over TARP. Who could I find? I should look at Goldman Sachs. Neil Kashkari decides he's going to be the guy, and he's appointed by Hank Paulson to run TARP. He'll oversee the whole TARP thing. By the way, side note, Neil Kashkari, he's no longer overseeing TARP. He's been replaced by Gary Gensler. Oh, how weird. He also used to be with Goldman Sachs. Wow, this is getting weird, isn't it? Then Goldman Sachs, after Paulson names Kashkari to oversee TARP, Goldman decides they really want to be a bank holding company. And so they change the title to a bank holding company. This is a move approved by the Federal Reserve. Okay, what does it mean? Well, it means if they change their name to a holding company, Well, gosh, then they can get access to the TARP money. They can get lending from the Fed's discount window. They can get money from just about everywhere, including you. This move also made it so the SEC, the watchdogs that were supposed to catch all of this stuff, they no longer oversaw anybody at Goldman Sachs because now they were a bank holding company. So who saw them? Well, that was the Fed. The Fed needed to see them. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which happened to be run by, you are never going to believe this is such a wild coincidence, happened to be run by Stephen Friedman. He was a former director and substantial shareholder of Goldman Sachs. That's fantastic. So he now is overseeing from the Fed all of the stuff with Goldman Sachs, just to make sure. But there's a problem. Because he is a shareholder, that's illegal. That's a conflict of interest. He needed to get a conflict of interest waiver. Well, lucky thing for him, Tim Geithner saw it his way, and he asked the Federal Reserve Board for a waiver enabling, Mr. Friedman to continue owning the Goldman stock as well as serving on their board of directors while he was watching to make sure that everything was okay. So he got the waiver. Oh, and then he asked for another waiver. He got a one-year waiver from the Fed so he could not only regulate it, but he could also buy some additional stock, in Goldman Sachs. And then he went out and he bought 52,000 shares of Goldman Sachs stocks. And that is, man, that's weird. Oh my gosh, I just saw a picture here. Oh, look at this. I'm just seeing, what is this? What is happening here? Oh my gosh, look. It's like a giant spider web, and guess who is caught in the web? You are. In the center of this whole thing was derivatives from Goldman Sachs. That was the whole problem that Hank Paulson set out to fix. Derivatives and oil speculation. Well, they've sure learned their lesson. Now that they got this big web here in the center, it's a new derivative. It's great. Something new. It's called cap and trade. Yeah, cap and trade. Voluntary action alone can solve this climate change problem. Goldman Sachs has endorsed mandatory government limits on carbon emissions, paid $23 million to purchase 10% interest in the climate exchange in Chicago. It has committed at least $1 billion to carbon assets, such as alternative energy projects and lobbying hard for carbon controls. Goldman Sachs. Glad they're around, huh? Oh, by the way, their new top lobbyist is Michael Pease. He's joining Goldman as a director of government affairs. He just happens to be the former top staffer to Representative Barney Frank. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Isn't he the chair of the House Financial Services Committee? That's weird. And who is Pease replacing at Goldman? Mark Patterson, formerly with Tom Daschle. Tom Daschle, isn't his wife now with GE? And she's lobbying for health care. That's weird. It's almost like, ooh, things are getting sticky in here. Oh, by the way, he's also going to be chief of staff at the Treasury. Oh, this is fantastic. I think my head is going to explode. It is absolutely unbelievable, and nobody is paying any attention to it at all. Instead, we watch about dead stars, or we watch a circus going on where people are lying to each other and just have an agenda. Is there anyone that has the agenda of our country anymore? Is it too much to ask that we find one person without a conflict of interest, or their only interest is our country and our children? We're being spun a web of lies, and we are caught up in the web. But don't worry, we've survived worse.